I want to start today's deep dive by taking you into a laboratory, but not a modern one.
We're going back a bit.
Yeah, exactly. I want you to picture the late 19th century. You know, gas lamps hissing, heavy brass microscopes, that distinct smell of formaldehyde, and, well, a lot of ambition.
Ambition is definitely the key ingredient there.
Absolutely, because in this lab, we have a chemist standing over a bubbling flask, and he believes he has figured out the ultimate secret.
And he isn't trying to turn lead into gold here.
No, he's trying to do something much, much bigger than that. He has a recipe.
A literal recipe.
Yes, and I actually want to read you this recipe because it's surprisingly specific. It isn't, eye of newt and toe of frog.
It's hard chemistry.
Right. Okay, grab a pen. You need exactly 245 parts of water. Got that?
245 parts water. Check.
Then you take 1,130 parts of carbon. Add in 714 parts of ammonia.
That is highly specific.
Isn't it? Then you toss in some salts, a bit of iron, a dash of phosphorus. Maybe a pinch of nitrogen for flavor.
It sounds like he's baking a very complicated, very unappetizing cake.
It really does. Now, the instructions say to put all of this into a vessel, heat it up, mix it gently, and then let it cool down.
Okay.
And if you believe the materialist chemists of that era, when you pull the stopper off that flask, you aren't going to find soup. You are going to find life.
Ah, the Frankenstein approach.
Exactly. The claim is that if you get the physical ingredients exactly right, the geometry, the elements, the heat, you should theoretically produce a living cell.
This is the theory of spontaneous generation.
Right.
And this is where we hit a wall immediately. Because this recipe represents a fundamental misunderstanding of the universe.
How so?
You can mix hydrogen and oxygen to get water. That's chemistry. You can mix blue and yellow to get green. That's physics, that's perception. But the question that launches our deep dive today is this. Can you mix carbon and iron and get a thought?
That is the million-dollar question. And frankly, it sounds impossible when you say it like that.
It really does. Can you mix ammonia and salts and create logic? Can you heat up water and phosphorus and create will?
Can you take dead ingredients and cook them until they become an opinion?
Exactly.
And that brings us directly to the source material we are unpacking today. We are doing a serious deep dive into the principle of mind and the mentality of matter.
Which is chapter 8 of a truly fascinating philosophical work called The Mental Unity of Existence by Abdul-Jabbar Al-Waily.
Yes, and Al-Waily takes that recipe for life we just mentioned, and he absolutely tears it apart.
He really does. His argument is radical, it's controversial, and honestly, it flips our entire understanding of reality upside down.
It does, because his main thesis, and we're going to spend this time proving this out step by step, is that mind isn't something that just magically appears once a body gets complex enough.
Right. It's not a ghost that floats into the machine once the gears start turning fast enough.
No. He argues that mind is the fundamental building block of the universe, that it's present in the smallest atom, the smallest particle of light.
He's arguing that the universe isn't a collection of dead rocks. It's a collection of thoughts.
So buckle up. We are going from that failed soup recipe down to the behavior of the very first cell, all the way down to the psychology of a photon.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so let's go back to that soup. The materialist view. The idea was that life is just a complex chemical reaction.
Right.
Al-Waily starts by attacking this head-on. He acknowledges that, sure, chemical reactions produce new forms of matter. If I mix acid and base, I get salt and water.
True. But he says that is a transformation within the exact same category. You are trading matter for matter. You're trading physical properties for physical properties.
He uses a really helpful analogy here about colors.
Yes, he does. He says if you mix red and white, you get pink. You have created a new color, but you haven't created a song.
I want to stick with that for a second. That's a really strong image.
It is. A color is a visual property. A song is an auditory temporal experience. They're in completely different categories of existence.
Right.
You can mix paint until the end of time, and you will never, ever produce a melody.
And Al-Waily is saying that matter and mind are fundamentally different categories, just like paint and music.
Exactly. Matter is extended in space. It has weight. It has mass.
Whereas mind is abstract. It has logic. It has will. It has preference.
Right. So Al-Waily argues that thinking you can mash matter together until it starts thinking is a logical impossibility. It's a category error.
So the materialists of the time say, look, we don't need magic. We just need the manera.
Ah, the Monera.
We need to explain this context for you because it's vital. Back in the 19th century, a biologist named Ernst Haeckel proposed the idea of the Monera.
Right. The Monera was supposed to be the simplest theoretical form of life. Haeckel and the materialists needed a bridge between dead matter and complex life.
A stepping stone.
Exactly. So they hypothesized this organism that was basically just a structureless blob of protoplasm. No organs, no nucleus, just jelly.
And the idea was that this blob was so incredibly simple, it could have just crystallized out of the ocean water.
Like salt crystals forming in a glass.
Right. They wanted it to be a happy accident of geology and chemistry, because if the cell is just a blob of jelly, then maybe the recipe we talked about at the beginning isn't so crazy.
Al-Waily says, stop. Put down the theory and actually look at the microscope. He challenges us to look at the actual behavior of these so-called simple cells.
And this is where the materialist argument really starts to crumble, because when you actually observe a single-celled organism, and Al-Waily cites biologists like Schaefer and Huxley here, it is not acting like a crystal.
Not even close. Let's list some of the things these blobs actually do.
Okay.
They digest food. That involves chemical breakdown and absorption. That is incredibly complex.
They sense light. They interact with their environment.
Some of them actually build shells.
Yeah.
Tiny, intricate houses for themselves out of the grit in their environment.
Imagine a blob of jelly being an architect.
Right. But the kicker, the thing that Al-Waily really focuses on, is movement, specifically intentional movement.
Yes. They advance towards things they need, like food, and they retreat from things that are dangerous, like acid or extreme heat.
Let's unpack that word, retreat. It sounds simple, but it is philosophically heavy.
How so?
If a single-celled organism retreats from danger, what has just happened?
I mean, it reacted like a ball bouncing off a wall.
See, that's the materialist defense. It's just a reflex.
Yeah.
But Al-Waily says no. A ball bounces off a wall because of physics. Momentum, elasticity.
The ball has no say in the matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a cell perceives a threat and moves away from it.
It makes a choice.
It made a choice. It perceived something, identified it as bad, and decided to go the other way. That is the definition of will.
Will.
Yes. In Arabic, the term is irada.
And if it has will?
It has a mind. This is the wedge Al-Waily uses to crack the whole materialist worldview open. If the very first, simplest cell has will, then we have to explain where that will came from.
Because you can't get will from carbon.
No. Carbon doesn't care if it's in a diamond or a pencil lead. It has no preference.
Yeah.
But a cell cares if it lives or dies.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Please do.
Because I can hear some of our listeners screaming at their speakers right now. They're saying, wait a minute, is it really will? Or is it just a mechanical switch, like a thermostat?
A thermostat is a good example.
Right. If the room gets hot, the AC turns on. The thermostat didn't choose to turn on the AC. It's a mechanism. Why isn't the cell just a biological thermostat?
That is the standard counter-argument. But Al-Waily anticipates this, and he dismantles it by deconstructing what is actually required for that reflex to happen in a living being.
Okay.
He argues that you cannot have will in isolation. You can't just have a move switch floating in a void.
And this leads us into the next major section of our deep dive, the 5 faculties of the primitive mind. This is really the engine of his argument.
It is. Al-Waily lays out a system. He says for that cell to retreat or advance, for it to act like a thermostat that actually cares, 5 distinct mental faculties must be working in perfect unison.
Let's list them out so we see the full picture, and then we'll break down how they connect.
Sure. The 5 faculties are 1, will, irada, the ability to choose action or inaction.
Got it.
2, conservation, or essentially memory, hafisa, storing past information.
Okay.
3, perception, idrak, sensing the environment.
Right.
4, thinking, tafkir, processing that information. And 5, deduction or preference, istintaj, deciding that X is better than Y.
Okay, that sounds like a massive amount of processing for a microscopic blob of jelly. Does a cell really have deduction? That sounds like Sherlock Holmes. I deduce that the nutrient is in the Petri dish.
It does sound high level when we use those words. But let's trace the chain of logic. This is the why analysis that Al-Waily uses. It's a dependency chain.
Like a house of cards.
Exactly. So let's go back to our cell. It moves toward a nutrient. That is will. But why did it move toward the nutrient?
Because it wants to eat.
Right. But why does it want to eat that specific thing? It must have decided that the nutrient was beneficial. It preferred the nutrient over the empty water.
Okay.
That is deduction or preference. It deduced, this is good for me.
I follow. It has to rank its options. Option A, starve. Option B, eat. It chooses B. That's deduction.
Exactly. But now we have to go deeper. How did it know it was good? To deduce that nutrient A is good, it must have a reference point. It must know what nutrient A is.
So it needs knowledge?
It needs memory. This is conservation. Hafisa. If the cell didn't have a stored memory or inherent knowledge that this chemical signal equals food, it would just stare at it.
It wouldn't know what to do.
The persons would be impossible.
Wait, hold on. Memory implies it learned it. Like, I remember that pizza tastes good because I ate pizza last week. But a cell might just be born knowing that?
But what is being born knowing that? And that is genetic memory. That is inherited information. Al-Waily's point is that the information must be present. Whether it learned it 5 minutes ago or inherited it from its parent millions of years ago, the data must be stored in the system.
Right.
If the database is empty, the cell cannot make a decision.
I see. So memory here just means stored information about the world.
Correct. And obviously, to access that memory, it had to see the nutrient first. So that's perception, ADRAC.
And thinking is the processing power that connects the perception to the memory to create the deduction.
Exactly. So look at the chain. 1, perception, I see a thing. 2, memory. I recognize this thing as food.
3, thinking. If I eat this, I survive.
4, deduction. Survival is better than death, so I should eat this. And 5, will. Move toward the thing.
Wow. When you break it down like that, it really is a closed system.
It's a closed loop. And here's the clincher. If you remove one of these faculties, the whole system collapses.
Let's test that.
Okay, imagine the cell has no memory. It sees the danger, that's perception, but it doesn't recall that this thing kills it. So it doesn't deduce that it should run. So it doesn't exercise will.
It just sits there and dies.
Right. Or if it has memory but no deduction. It sees the poison, remembers that is poison, but it doesn't have the faculty to say poison is bad. It just says, oh look, poison. And he sits there.
Exactly. It would be a passive observer. It wouldn't act.
So Al-Waily's massive insight here is this. If you see a cell showing will, which we do, every time it hunts or hides, you must logically assume it has the other 4 faculties too.
You can't have the tip of the iceberg without the rest of the iceberg.
Precisely. It's a package deal. And this leads him to a stunning conclusion about the first cell. The materialist called it a blob. Al-Waily calls it a rational animal.
A rational animal. That is a heavy title for a germ.
In a primitive sense, yes. He argues it possesses a primitive mind. Now, he clarifies this mind is stripped of complex emotions.
Right, the cell isn't falling in love.
It isn't writing poetry. It isn't feeling existential dread.
It's not worrying about its taxes.
No taxes for the Monera. But it is fully equipped with the tools of survival and logic. It calculates. It remembers. It chooses.
It's a tiny, logical machine, but not a machine, a mind. Because like you said earlier, a machine acts for the user. The cell acts for itself.
Correct. The cell has an ego. It has a self that it wants to protect. That is the hallmark of mind.
Okay, so we've established that the first cell, the start of biological life, had a mind. It wasn't just a chemical accident. But this creates a huge problem, doesn't it?
Because of where the cell came from.
Right. Which brings us to the inheritance paradox.
Yes.
If we accept the scientific consensus that the first cell emerged from dead matter, from dirt, water, gas, lightning, then where on earth did it get this space?
Mind. This is where Al-Waily invokes a classic logical maxim. The one who lacks a thing cannot give it.
The one who lacks a thing cannot give it. Can you expand on that?
It's simple logic. I cannot give you $1 million if I don't have $1 million.
Unfortunately.
Right. I cannot teach you French if I don't know French.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
So apply this to the universe. If the soup, the carbon, the water, the ammonia is truly dead, if it is truly mindless and dumb, then it cannot bestow mind upon the cell.
It's impossible.
You cannot get something from nothing.
But the materialist would say it emerged. That complexity creates consciousness. Like how a single brick isn't a wall, but 1,000 bricks are a wall.
But Al-Waily would argue that a wall is just a pile of bricks. It's still physical. You haven't changed the nature of the brick. You've just arranged them.
That's a good point.
Here we are talking about going from dead to alive, from mindless to mindful. That is a qualitative leap, not a quantitative one. If the ingredients are dead, the cake should be dead.
So if the cell has a mind and the cell came from matter,
then the matter itself must have possessed those mental faculties before it formed the cell.
Whoa. Okay, so he's saying the ingredients in that soup, the carbon, the nitrogen, the iron, they weren't just dead stuff, they had minds.
That is the radical proposal. Al-Waily argues that life, or mind, isn't an accident. It isn't a fungus that grows on matter later.
It is an inherent property of matter.
Exactly. The atoms that came together to build the cell must have had a primitive form of memory, a primitive form of will. Otherwise, they couldn't have passed it on to the cell.
This reminds me of panpsychism in Western philosophy, the idea that consciousness is everywhere.
It's very similar. Al-Waily is rejecting the idea of emergence, that mind emerges from non-mind. He's saying mind is fundamental. It's there at the atomic level. It's baked into the bricks.
Okay, but this raises a practical question, which brings us to the atomic mind and the indivisibility problem.
Yes.
Because, okay, let's say a cell has a mind. Cells divide. We know this. Mitosis. One cell becomes two.
Right.
If the cell has one mind and it splits in half physically, does the mind get cut in half? Do you get two half minds?
This is a brilliant philosophical trap that Al-Waily sets up to prove his point about atoms. He wants to force us to admit that the mind is atomic.
How does the trap work?
He starts by defining the nature of mind. He argues that mind is simple. Now, in philosophy, simple doesn't mean easy.
Right, it means non-composite.
Exactly. It means it isn't made of parts. Matter is composite. You can cut a rock in half, you can cut a table in half, you can cut a sandwich in half.
Sure.
But can you cut a thought in half?
No.
Can you take the concept of justice and slice it down the middle? Can you cut will in half physically?
No, that doesn't make sense. You either will something or you don't. You can't have 50% of a concept physically separated from the other 50%.
Right. So we have a contradiction. Premise 1, the cell divides physically. Premise 2, the mind cannot be divided physically.
Okay.
If the cell was a single entity with a single indivisible soul, when it's split, the soul would have to stay with one half, and the other half would be dead.
But both halves are alive. Both halves have a mind.
Exactly. So if the mind wasn't cut, and yet we have two minds now, then the cell's mind was never a single ghost possessing the whole body to begin with.
Then what was it?
The reveal. The cell is actually a colony.
A colony.
A colony of minded particles. Al-Waily argues that the mind of the cell isn't one big consciousness. It is the collective consciousness of the billions of atoms that make it up.
Wait, so it's like a city?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think of a city like New York. Does New York have a mind?
Sort of.
It has a collective mood. It makes decisions. It grows.
Yeah.
But if you split New York in half, you don't kill the spirit of New York. You just have two smaller groups of people.
The citizens, the atoms, are the real thinkers.
Yes.
That is wild. So when the cell splits, the mind doesn't get cut. The colony just separates.
Right.
Some citizens go to colony A, some citizens go to colony B. They take their own tiny atomic minds with them.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this solves the inheritance paradox perfectly.
Yeah.
The cell has a mind because its parts have minds. It's a democracy of atoms.
This allows Al-Waily to critique those two major philosophical schools we always hear about, dualism and materialism.
Right. Dualism is the Descartes thing. Mind and body are separate.
Descartes said, mind is a spirit, body is a machine, and they somehow interact, like a driver in a car.
Al-Waily hates this. He asks, how? How does a ghost push a brick? They are fundamentally too different. An abstract idea cannot physically push a physical atom.
Because if the mind is non-physical, it can't touch the physical body.
Exactly. Al-Waily's solution is incredibly elegant. The atom is mental. There is no separation.
So the physical movement of the atom is just the external expression of its internal will.
Yes.
So it's not a ghost in a machine. The machine is made of ghosts.
That's a spooky way to put it, but yes, he actually compares his view to Leibniz.
The German philosopher?
Right, the one who talked about monads. Leibniz believed the universe was made of spiritual atoms. Al-Waily says the atom is spiritual or mental in reality, but it appears material to us from the outside.
Okay, I need to really wrap my head around this atom is mental thing. Because when I think of an atom, I think of a little solar system.
Most people do.
Protons, electrons, spinning around. Hard little balls of energy. How does Al-Waily get from hard little ball to thinking unit?
This takes us to the physics of thought. And this is where he drills down to the absolute bottom of reality. He's going to strip away the hard little ball idea entirely.
Okay.
He goes from cells to atoms, then from atoms to protons and electrons, and then he goes one step further to photons.
Light.
Light. And he cites the physics of his time, which is actually quite aligned with modern quantum field theory in some interesting ways, stating that all matter is essentially condensed energy.
Condensed light.
Yes. He gives a specific data point from the physics of his era. An electron is roughly 1,840 photons packed together.
1,840 photons.
Okay.
Whether that number is exact by modern standards or not, the concept is clear. Matter is frozen light.
Essentially, Al-Waily argues that the photon, where the simplest particle, the unit of energy, is the true unit of existence.
Solid the logic.
The cell is made of atoms.
Atoms are made of photons.
The cell has a mind.
Therefore, the photon must be the source of that mind. The photon is the mental atom.
Exactly. But he doesn't just assert it. He analyzes the properties of light to prove it.
What are the fundamental properties of a photon?
Well, it moves, and it has extension, meaning it travels, it takes up space, it has a wavelength.
But extension sounds physical. Taking up space is a physical thing.
Is it? This is where Al-Waily gets really matrixy. He argues that movement and extension are actually mental ideas held in the memory of the photon.
Wait, extension is a mental idea. That sounds like there is no spoon.
It is a bit like that. Think about a dream. In a dream, you see a house. The house has extension. It looks big. It takes up space.
Right.
But is there any physical brick in your brain taking up space?
No, it's just an image in my mind.
Exactly. The space in the dream is a mental projection. Al-Waily suggests a subjective versus objective twist on the whole universe.
Right.
We usually think ideas are in our head and matter is outside. Al-Waily suggests the matter outside is made of the ideas or memories of the photons themselves.
So the photon remembers it is light.
The photon remembers it is light. It remembers it is moving. That memory is its existence.
So if the photon forgot it was moving, it would cease to exist.
Yes. So the physical world, the hard table I'm touching right now, is actually a collection of mental realities. It feels hard to us, but that's just the interaction of our senses with their energy.
So the table isn't made of wood, it's made of solidified thought.
In a sense, yes. He actually quotes a thought regarding energy in the text. He says, what we call the material world is energy, and energy is closer to what we call life or mind.
That's beautiful.
If you strip away the illusion of solidity, all you have is dancing energy. And Al-Waily says that dance is a conscious dance.
That completely changes how I look at a light bulb. It's not just emitting particles, it's emitting little minds.
Little units of will and memory. It makes the universe incredibly alive.
But this raises the biggest question of all, and this is what always bothers me about panpsychism. If every single photon has a mind, if the universe is just a soup of trillions upon quadrillions of tiny minds, how is it not total chaos?
It's a fair question.
How do they form a rock? How do they form a hand? Why aren't they just flying around doing their own thing? Why isn't the universe just a noisy static of conflicting wills?
This is where we get into the implications in the social universe.
Yeah.
This is my favorite part of his theory because it bridges physics and sociology.
Physics and sociology.
Yes. If every photon has will, why do they agree to stick together? Al-Waily argues that these particles have the capacity for interaction, cooperation, and arrangement.
So evolution isn't random.
Right. Evolution, in his view, is not random mechanical bumping. It is the social coordination of primitive minds.
So an atom isn't a structure, it's a treaty.
It's a society. A group of photons agrees through some primitive form of communication or resonance to build an electron. They sacrifice some of their freedom to create a stable community. Then a group of electrons and protons agree to build an atom. Then atoms agree to build a molecule. It is a democratic process of building complexity.
That is fascinating. So when a cell evolves, it's not just survival of the fittest in a brutal mechanical sense.
Yeah.
It's the minds inside the matter figuring out better ways to cooperate.
Exactly. It re-enchants the universe. It makes the universe a social place, not a dead mechanical place. The laws of physics aren't laws imposed from the outside. They are the constitutions that these particles have agreed to follow.
And this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, Zeno's paradox. We mentioned Zeno earlier. He was the guy who said motion is impossible, right?
Right. Zeno was an ancient Greek philosopher. His paradox is about infinite divisibility.
Can you break that down for us?
Sure. He said, to walk across the room, you first have to go halfway.
Makes sense.
To go the remaining halfway, you have to go half of that, and then half of that. Since you can divide space infinitely, you have an infinite number of steps to take.
Because there's always a smaller half.
Exactly. You can never finish an infinite task. So logic dictates you can never move.
Which is obviously wrong because I walked into the studio today.
Exactly. Motion exists. So Zeno's logic must be flawed. But for thousands of years, it was hard to say why.
And Al-Waily uses his theory to solve it.
He does. He says Zeno's wrong because you cannot divide forever. Matter isn't infinitely divisible. Eventually, you hit the floor.
The mental unit.
The photon.
The monad.
The monad. And the simplest mind. Because mind is simple meaning indivisible, you eventually hit a unit of reality that just is. You can't cut it.
It's like pixels on a screen.
That's a great way to look at it.
You can zoom in on a photo, but eventually you hit a single square of color. You can't cut the pixel.
So the universe has a resolution,
Mm-hmm.
and that resolution is the mental particle.
And because reality is pixelated by these mental units, you don't have to cross an infinity.
Right. You just have to cross a finite number of pixels. Motion is saved.
It's amazing how he ties ancient Greek paradoxes, 19th century biology, and quantum physics into one unified theory.
It is the mental unity of existence.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's pause and really look at the arc we've just traveled.
It's been a long one.
We started with a Frankenstein recipe. We tried to mix chemicals to make life, and we failed. Why? Because you can't mix matter to create mind.
Right.
So we look at the first cell, we saw it acting with will and deduction, we realized it's a rational animal.
A primitive mind.
Then we traced that mind backwards, from the cell to the atom to the electron, and finally to the photon. And the conclusion is...
The grand conclusion is that the universe isn't a dead stage where life appeared by accident. The universe is made of life.
It is made of mind particles rearranging themselves. Matter is just the shape that mind takes when it works together.
That is a beautiful, if slightly overwhelming thought.
It really is. It means there is no dead matter. The dirt is thinking, the water is remembering, the air is willing.
In a primitive, fundamental sense, yes.
Yeah.
Everything is awake.
So what does this all mean for us, for you, the listener sitting there, composed of trillions of cells?
It leads to a final provocative thought. And this is something for you to mull over after the deep dive ends.
Lay it on us.
We tend to think of ourselves as I. One person. One soul. One mind. But if Al-Waily is right, if every atom in your body has a primitive mind, a will, and a memory.
Are you really a single person?
Exactly. Or are you a vast democratic civilization?
A civilization?
Think about it. Are you a coalition government of trillions of tiny conscious particles working together for a common goal?
So when you feel hungry, is that your thought? Or is it the collective shouting of a billion cells demanding resources?
That is terrifying and amazing.
And it makes me wonder, when I decide to lift my arm, is that a dictator giving an order? Or is it a consensus reached by the billions of atoms in my arm agreeing to move?
And here's the truly haunting part. When you die, when the coalition dissolves, the atoms don't disappear.
No, they go back into the earth. They go into the air.
What happens to their memories? Do the particles that made up you remember being you?
Do they carry tiny fragments of your life into the next thing they build? Does the atom that was in my brain go into a tree? And does that tree now remember a piece of my thought?
According to Al-Waily, the conservation of memory suggests the answer might be yes.
Wow. Okay, on that note, I think we need to let you all process this. Next time you turn on a lamp, look at the light. Don't just see energy. Try to see thought.
Thank you for guiding us through this incredibly deep dive.
My pleasure. It's a universe of mind out there. Thanks for listening, everyone. Keep wondering.